After Prince Philip died, his family expressed their grief. But what Queen Elizabeth shared was especially heartbreaking. Allegedly, the Queen said in private that his passing left a huge void. It's difficult to imagine a time when he was anything but a British consort. But believe it or not, Prince Philip was not British at all. He was born to both the Greek and Danish royal families in the Greek island of Corfu on June 10th, 1921. In fact, his road to Queen Elizabeth was filled with tragedy, drama, and a good amount of controversy. Although Philip came from a royal lineage, his childhood wasn't exactly like what you see in the movies. He was born in a time when his home nation was beset with conflicts, and his family felt the full brunt of that danger. Greece took a hammering in the Greco-Turkish War, and growing discontent among the Greek military led to a revolution in 1922. Not only did Philip's uncle, King Constantine I, have to abdicate, his own father, Prince Andrew, found himself behind bars. Then, when Philip was still just a toddler, the situation came to an alarming climax. Fearing for their lives, the Greek royal family fled their country to take refuge in France. But that wasn't the worst part. The situation was deteriorating so fast and so violently that Philip's family had to resort to smuggling their baby heir out of the country inside of a fruit box. From this dramatic beginning, Prince Philip's life only got more extraordinary. Growing up in France, young Philip attended the Elms, an American school where he was described as a know-it-all smarty person, but always remarkably polite. For most of the 1930s, he moved between schools in England, Scotland, and Germany, and the strapping and strikingly handsome prince would woo girls with his sharp wit, charm, and by, being a prince. During his childhood, Philip had almost no contact with his mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg. Why? Well, during the Greco-Turkish conflict, Alice started to believe she was getting divine messages and possessed healing powers. Eventually, doctors diagnosed her with schizophrenia, and she spent Philip's formative years in a sanatorium in Switzerland. The hardships of World War II left Princess Alice impoverished. By the time the occupying forces left Athens in October 1944, she was said to be in squalid conditions. In the late 1930s, tensions were rising in Europe. World War II was on the horizon, and Philip's family made some really questionable choices that would later cause some awkward silences around the dinner table at Christmas. Four of Philip's sisters married high-ranking German princes. Here's 3 of them illustrating an example of terrible feng shui. This put them smack dab in the upper echelons of the Third Reich. One of Philip's German-loving older sisters was also his favourite sibling, Princess Cecily, yet a horrific kind of karma came for her. On November 16, 1937, Cecily perished in a plane crash alongside her husband, 2 sons, and mother-in-law. So yeah, pretty much Philip's entire extended family on that side. But the tragedy doesn't stop there. Philip's sister Cecily was pregnant with her 4th child. In fact, she had actually started to give birth mid-flight, and it was this chaotic event that likely caused the accident as the pilot attempted to land despite poor weather conditions. At the time, Philip was only 16 years old, and he'd already seen so much devastation. If he was beginning to think his family was cursed, he had a pretty good case. Prince Philip was a man of duty and action above all else, and that went double when he was a young, ambitious man. In 1939, he enlisted to fight in World War II. Of course, this also meant he was directly in conflict with no fewer than 2 of his brothers-in-law, Prince Christoph of Hesse and Berthold, Margrave of Baden. Philip emerged from the fight as a naval hero. and now he was about to meet his destiny. When Prince Philip met his future wife Elizabeth, he was only 18 years old. At the time, Elizabeth was just a bare 13 years old, and she was absolutely head over heels for her Prince Charming. The soon-to-be Queen Elizabeth II swore she would have no one but Philip. Ordinarily, this would be kind of weird and creepy, but when it comes to royalty, this is actually about as unweird and uncreepy as it gets. The British royal family isn't famous for its wise decisions around marriage, and in Philip and Elizabeth's case, they had to be pulled apart. Elizabeth's father, King George VI, made Philip promise to wait until her 21st birthday to tie the knot, just in case she wanted to back out. Then again, the king might have had another reason to be wary. Elizabeth's father initially didn't like Philip one bit. First, there was the optics. George didn't know how the public would take to the marriage between his female heir and a Greek prince. Besides that, Philip's manners were brash and to the point, befitting of a naval officer, and they rubbed the cultured king the wrong way. Maybe that's why the royal family made a huge demand of Philip. In order to join the British royal family, Philip had to be nothing but British himself. So as his relationship with Elizabeth grew more serious, Philip actually gave up all of his Greek and Danish titles and adopted his mother's family name of Mountbatten to become a naturalised British subject. Only then could he become formally engaged to Elizabeth. On November 20th, 1947, Prince Philip finally won his princess, and he and Elizabeth married at the stately Westminster Abbey. The BBC broadcast the ceremony through the radio to 200 million listeners worldwide. In the days before the blockbuster TV broadcast of Prince Charles and Diana's wedding, those were big numbers. But there was also something big missing. Despite the humongous global audience of Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip's wedding, the groom's surviving three sisters weren't there. After all, World War II had just ended, and all three of the sisters had still very much married those German princes. Understandably, guests like that didn't fly with the palace. In fact, none of Philip's German relatives were present. Nope, the only Germans allowed were the British royal family themselves.
Good Lord, I mean, we're British, aren't we?
You're not, you're German.
Look, I'm as British as Queen Victoria!
So your father's German, you're half German, and you married a German?
In Britain's long history, Prince Philip was just the fifth male consort of a reigning British queen. He follows in the royal footsteps of Philip II of Spain, William III, Prince George of Denmark, and Prince Albert, consort to Queen Victoria. In case you get the idea that Prince Philip was nothing but a manly man, think again. For all his blunt manners, Philip truly loved Queen Elizabeth, and this was evident from day one of their marriage. Case in point, on the morning of their wedding, Philip's gift to Elizabeth was to quit smoking. Sounds like he just forgot to buy her an actual gift, doesn't it? But speaking of gifts, today perhaps no engagement ring is as famous as Princess Diana's blue sapphire ring, which now sits on Kate Middleton's finger. But Queen Elizabeth's ring has its own heart-rending backstory. Philip constructed the ring with diamonds from his long-estranged mother's own tiara, plus he made a bracelet with the leftovers. In 1948, Elizabeth gave birth to their son and heir, Prince Charles, in a gruelling 30 hours of labour, and Philip was nowhere to be found. In fact, the prince passed the time by playing squash and swimming with a friend. He was drying himself off when a footman informed him of his first child's birth. Nobody's really ready to be a dad, but given Prince Philip's completely dysfunctional family, it's not surprising that he ran into some issues when it came to raising his children. In fact, when Prince Charles was first born, Philip dealt the newborn a cold insult. He reportedly looked at the baby and said, "He looks like a plum pudding." See, this is the kind of insensitive but kind of hilarious candour that we think of when we think of Prince Philip. This is the face of a man with no filter. Prince Charles and Princess Anne had notoriously chilly childhoods. After all, their parents were rather busy being the figureheads of a country while they were still in diapers. Prince Charles even once confessed that it was inevitably the nursery staff who taught him to play and looked after his emotional needs, not his father. Philip had grown up in such a dog-eat-dog environment, he couldn't help but hand the misery down to his children. He wasn't just an unemotional dad. The strict disciplinarian often took to belittling both Charles and Anne as they were growing up to intentionally help them develop a thicker skin. Father and son reportedly had a difficult time growing close to each other, and instead, Philip's favourite was very likely Princess Anne, who was sturdy, rational and sharp, like her dear old dad. This remained even after the birth of his younger sons, but then no wonder with sons like these. Still, for all his difficulties as a father, Philip was about to be thrown for another loop entirely. After his royal marriage, Prince Philip's fast-paced life sped up even more. On February 6, 1951, Philip and Elizabeth were on a Commonwealth tour when they received the news that changed their lives forever. Elizabeth's father, King George, had passed away, and she was now Queen Elizabeth II, while Prince Philip was officially her royal consort. Although Philip and Elizabeth had been getting along just fine, trouble started to brew almost as soon as Elizabeth was crowned. In particular, nobody knew what to name her royal house. Though the traditional Philip pushed for her to take the House of Edinburgh in his honour, it wasn't to be. No less than Prime Minister Winston Churchill vetoed the idea, and Philip's response was nothing short of nasty. It was starting to dawn on the proud Philip that he had married a woman who would always be his superior, and he didn't take it lying down. Although he always put on a brave face in public, the privacy of his own home was a much different story. All this turmoil likely caused an immense amount of pain behind the scenes inside Buckingham Palace, so much so that many speculate Queen Elizabeth made a huge concession to her husband. See, for the first part of Queen Elizabeth's reign, Philip was not a prince, instead he was still just the Duke of Edinburgh. But that changed soon enough. In 1957, Elizabeth promoted her husband to official Prince Consort of the United Kingdom. Happy husband, happy life. Or so she thought. Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth had an incredibly long marriage, the longest of any British ruler and their consort. But that doesn't mean it was scandal-free. Indeed, early on in their union, dark rumours started swirling. Sources whispered that Prince Philip had a wandering eye, and his sense of timing couldn't have been more insulting. One of the most dogged rumours about Prince Philip was that he had engaged in an affair with actress Pat Kirkwood, whom he wrote letters and paid visits to in 1948, while poor Elizabeth was actually pregnant with Prince Charles. Of course, the palace has vehemently denied these rumours as mere gossip, but Kirkwood says differently. Though she claims nothing intimate happened, it doesn't mean Philip didn't want it. There is, however, another interpretation of Philip's scandalous behaviour. Nearly everyone who knew Philip agrees that he did always notice attractive women, but all he did was look. Philip himself once addressed the rumours by noting that since he constantly had a security detail, he would never have been able to get away with any kind of affair. Believe it or not, Elizabeth and Philip were just beginning their reign as this newfangled device called the television was coming to prominence. As a result, Philip was the first ever member of the royal family to be interviewed on TV in 1961. What was the hot topic? His take on Commonwealth Technical Training Week, where he advocated for more skilled workers in the labour force. It still sounds better than 90% of the stuff on Netflix. Throughout his years as a consort, Philip got himself into some very hot water, and not just over his own supposed relationships. He also reportedly stuck his nose in the drama of his extended family. Specifically when Princess Margaret tried to marry and then broke things off with her lover Peter Townsend, many thought that Prince Philip's disapproval was behind their split. Speaking of hot water, just a side note to say that Philip was reportedly not fond of tea. He preferred black coffee. Madman. As Prince Charles came of marrying age, both Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth wanted him to marry well, and they had their sights set on the young, naive and well-bred Lady Diana Spencer. Now, we know that this idea was ultimately an utter disaster and that Charles was still very much in love with his ex, Camilla Parker Bowles, for some reason, but few people know about Philip's role in the matter. Ever the strong, decisive man, Prince Philip pushed Charles to make up his mind about Diana. In 1981, Philip apparently even wrote to his son demanding that Charles either propose to the poor girl or else break it off forever. Feeling the pressure from his old man, Charles and Diana married just 6 months later.
We have reports from Paris that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been killed in a car accident.
When Princess Diana died in a horrific car crash in 1997, just a year after her divorce from Prince Charles, the royal family was polarised about how to respond. They were at a loss about what the right path forward was, both in their roles as monarchs and in their roles as family members. Everyone, that is, except Philip. At Princess Diana's funeral, Philip's grandsons William and Harry were apprehensive about walking behind their mother's coffin, so he swooped in to help them. People who admired Prince Philip often noted how down-to-earth he was. He was a simple military man who wanted to look people straight in the eye. One former White House butler recalled a visit in 1979 where Philip struck up a conversation with him and a co-worker and even took the liberty of pouring their drinks. But as with many of Philip's qualities, this informality was a double-edged sword. Over the years, Philip became infamous for his witty comments, some of which were offensive, while others were simply rude. Thing is, Philip was totally aware of his reputation and took it in good humour. Because of his seeming lack of sensitivity, he rubbed some people the wrong way. Like, imagine being called a fat little Canadian by Prince Philip. Well, that's not exactly what happened, but Philip did cause a minor Canadian scandal in 1959 when apparently he made remarks that inferred Canadian kids were too out of shape. But he also rubbed some people the right way, and none more so than a tribe on the island of Vanuatu in the South Pacific who believe Philip is a god, presumably because they'd never heard him speak. When knowledge of the Prince Philip movement was brought to the prince himself, it was suggested that he send them a signed portrait. He agreed, and the grateful villagers sent him a pig-killing club in return. He sent them another portrait back, posing with the club. Like his grandson Prince Harry, Prince Philip loved flying. Indeed, Philip was actually the first member of the British royal family to fly a helicopter, and he had been flying airplanes since 1952. By his 70th birthday, he had amassed over 5,000 pilot hours. He was also a prolific author, with several books under his name on environmentalism, horses, and other animal subjects. A few of his page-turners include Selected Speeches 1948 to 1955, Birds from Britannia, and Survival or Extinction, A Christian Attitude to the Environment. The things you can spend time doing when you literally don't have to worry about anything ever. If those weren't enough proverbial feathers in his cap, Prince Philip was also an oil painter. The English artist and writer Hugh Casson once described his works as exactly what you'd expect. Totally direct, no hanging about, strong colours, vigorous brushstrokes. Now that you mention it, he does look like a man of vigorous brushstrokes. Philip and Queen Elizabeth walked a long road, but everyone agrees they ended their years together still completely and utterly in love. One royal dresser even recalled a touching moment where she was finishing the hem on one of the Queen's gowns, when Prince Philip walked in and commented, nice dress." Elizabeth apparently couldn't help but blush furiously. Talk about a silver tongue. Before his health troubles, Prince Philip made the news once more after Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's interview on Oprah. The couple made a claim that a prominent member of the royal family had expressed concerns about their baby's skin colour. Because of Philip's outspoken nature, many people assumed that he was the family member in question. However, Meghan and Harry quickly denied this and cleared Philip of wrongdoing. In his later years, Philip was still one of the hardest working members of the royal family, even surpassing young bucks like Prince William. For example, when he was 96 years old, Philip logged 110 days of public engagement. In 2016, he was the 5th busiest member of the entire family. Safe to say, his golden years were strong and long. On April 9th, 2021, Prince Philip passed after months of health complications at the age of 99, just 2 months before he turned 100 years old. In classic Philip fashion, he demanded that his funeral have no fuss. Isn't that just like him? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.